was born in Corsica in 1769. He became an army officer in 1785, and after being promoted many times, he took command of the Army of the Interior in 1795 at age 26. At this point, he was a major general in the French army. Because of this, he was in charge of officers older than himself. He felt that if he married an older woman, he'd be able to claim he was older and therefore gain more respect from his officers. He also wanted to marry someone rich. Josephine was born as Marie Joseph Rose Tascher to Joseph and Rose Marie Tascher in 1763. She was known as Rose or Yayette as a child. Her family's plantation, Trois Îlettes, was destroyed by hurricanes in 1766 and left them in a financial lurch. Her aunt, Joseph's sister Edme, was the mistress of Francois de Beauharnais, a man of rank and money. The two families arranged a marriage between his son Alexander and Joseph's 12-year-old daughter Catherine. However, while the announcement letter of their engagement was on its way to Martinique, Catherine died. Joseph instead brought his older daughter Rose along to marry Alexander. Although Alexander was shocked by the substitution of brides, the marriage took place on 1779 on December 15th. They had two children, Hortense and Eugene, but they had an unhappy marriage. Alexander went back to Martinique and had a mistress. Rose was unhappy with this and applied for and received a legal separation. Alexander was a supporter of the revolution, but being a noble, he was arrested in March 1794. Rose tried to prevent this from happening and was thrown into jail with him. Alexander was executed on July 21, 1794. She had reason to believe she would die as well, but she was released on August 6, 1794 as Robespierre had been overthrown. Reunited with her children and without a way to support them, she found other ways to live. She turned to her friends, Therese Tallien and Paul Barras. She became the mistress of several people in the position to help support her.
After the Battle of Toulon, Napoleon was invited to a party hosted by one of the directors, Paul Barras. Barras wanted to use Napoleon's military skills for his own political and personal benefit. At the time, Barras had a mistress, Rose de Beauharnais, that he wanted to get rid of. He knew that Napoleon was looking for someone to marry. He decided to give his mistress to Napoleon. However, he did not let her know what he had decided to do. He had only told her that he wanted her to entertain Napoleon at a party and show a liking in him and praise his military skills. This was all Napoleon needed to like her. She was older than him but not too much, and she had displayed a liking in him, or so he thought. This and some urging from Barras after the party was all that Napoleon needed to pursue the marriage.
Napoleon began to pursue Rose, but he didn't like her name, so he told her that he would call her Josephine. He pursued, and Josephine kept entertaining him. At last, Barras told Josephine to marry Napoleon. Barras told her that he had a new mistress, and that he could not afford to have them both, and that if she did not marry Napoleon, he would stop providing for her, and she would, in effect, be thrown out of her house and onto the streets. Josephine could not bear this happening to her. She was a very lavish spender. Another problem was her two children, Eugene and Hortense. She gave in to Barras and agreed to marry Napoleon.
They were married, and a few days later Napoleon went to Italy. He truly loved Josephine at this time, but Josephine had different feelings about him. She hated him and thought he was boring. As soon as he was gone, she began to play around with him. As time passed by, she had many lovers, faked missing him when responding to his daily love letters, and did everything possible to avoid joining him in Italy, as he was constantly asking her to join him. She even went so far that she pretended that she was pregnant and could not travel. All this time she was going to parties, attending balls, and committing adultery. From time to time, when Napoleon begged her to join him, she asked Barras for assistance to tell him that she could not join him in Italy. During this time, some of Napoleon's officers, Murat for instance, had returned to Paris with the mission of getting Josephine to Italy to be with Napoleon willingly or unwillingly, and had occasion to attend one of the parties Josephine was hosting, or a party she was attending. This was the time when Josephine made up the pregnancy story, which Murat took back to Napoleon. While in Paris, Murat also heard all the gossip about Josephine making a fool about Napoleon. Finally, it got to the point that Napoleon was getting so anxious that Barras was scared that he would return to France and forget about the Italian campaign. This did not make Barras happy because he was making a lot of money from the campaign, so he demanded that Josephine go join Napoleon. Napoleon was expecting a pregnant Josephine. When she arrived, she explained to him that she had had a miscarriage. Napoleon was very upset that he had lost his supposed son.
The Italian campaign was finally over and Napoleon was able to go home to Paris. Josephine had to be good while she was around him. Then Napoleon decided to go to Egypt. Barras thought this was a good plan because Napoleon was beginning to become extremely popular. When he left, Josephine went back to how she usually acted. On July 19th, 1798, while going towards Cairo in boiling hot sun, Bourrienne, Napoleon's secretary, out of the corner of his eye, noticed Napoleon and Juno walking together.
Bourrienne reasoned the subject of the conversation between Juno and Napoleon and was positive that Juno had exaggerated what he had said to Napoleon. The truth is, many of Napoleon's staff officers knew of what Josephine was doing, and it was common knowledge in Paris. Juno, unlike the rest of Napoleon's acquaintances, had never gotten the rank of Marshal of France and had stopped at general. It is believed by many historians that Napoleon never forgave Juno for telling him this information and for this very reason didn't allow him to reach the ranking of Marshal.
Once he had confirmed this information, he destroyed his love for Josephine. From this moment onward, he never loved another woman the way he loved Josephine. When Josephine learned that Napoleon was coming home from Egypt early, she got scared. She left with her daughter, Hortense, to meet Napoleon at the port so that she could convince him that she had been faithful, but Napoleon landed at another port and got home before them. When Josephine got back to Paris, she found out that Napoleon had gotten home before her and that he had locked himself in a room in their house. Suddenly, after all her affairs, she finally started to love him, but she did this too late, as he was already over her. He would not see her until Hortense begged him to. When he saw her, he told Josephine that she had crushed his heart and he could never love again.
They stayed husband and wife from that point on, but he was not faithful to her. Although this was very odd, she had fallen in love with him. Napoleon had loved lady after lady. Now, although Napoleon did not love Josephine, he did like her 2 children and respected her abilities to do different tasks. He knew that as long as he was married to Josephine, he could not have an heir of his own, so over a period of time, when Hortense and his brother had a son, Napoleon named him his heir.
Now that Napoleon had found an heir, he thought that he should finally divorce Josephine. Then, in December 1805, he became Emperor of the French. He brought the Pope to Paris to perform the coronation. Shortly after the Pope's arrival, Josephine accidentally said that she and Napoleon had never had a formal wedding, only a civil marriage. In the Church's mind, they were not married and had been living in sin the entire time. Napoleon was very upset. Now, in order to become emperor, he had to make the marriage highly regarded and had to put away his ideas of divorce for a while. Napoleon still wanted an heir of his own blood, so he began to bargain with Tsar Alexander of Russia to marry his sister. This would help in 3 ways. 1. It would create a powerful bond with another strong group. 2. It would help to lessen Napoleon's so-called skanky claim to royalty. And 3. It would give Napoleon a woman to have his child, and therefore an heir.
The agreement soon broke off. Napoleon's foreign minister, Talleyrand, did not want this agreement and made sure it would not work by telling information about Napoleon to the Russian court. The Tsar mother did not allow her daughter to marry Napoleon. Therefore, Napoleon gave up on the Russians and turned his attention to Austria. He planned to marry Maria Louisa, whose name he changed to Mary Louise, who was the Emperor of Austria's most favored daughter and an Archduchess of Austria. Mary Louise was not what Napoleon expected her to be like. She was a huge displeasure. In order to marry Marie Louise, he had to divorce Josephine, which he eventually did. But he had grown to love her again, not the way he used to, but in a respectful way. He told her that she could keep the title as an empress and provided for her and her children.
In 1814, when Napoleon abdicated, Marie Louise returned to Austria with her father and took their child with her. Napoleon never saw her again. Josephine still loved Napoleon. Later that year, she was dying with diphtheria. Napoleon's name was one of the last words she said. Hortense and Eugene continued to be good towards Napoleon. When he died in 1821, his last words emphasized his entire life. France, the army, Josephine.